You don't need to fight, argue, or explain yourself to people who drain your energy. You don't need to win their approval or prove your worth to someone who thrives on control, manipulation, or constant negativity. There is something far more powerful you can do, something that doesn't require shouting or confrontation. It only requires one decision: to choose your peace over their chaos. When you truly make that decision and hold your ground, toxic people lose all power over you, not because they've changed, but because you did. Toxic people feed off of reaction. They test your boundaries, poke at your insecurities, and look for any sign that they can still control your mood. And every time you react with anger, frustration, or the need to justify yourself, they win. They thrive in your emotional response. But when you stop giving them that energy, when you respond with calm indifference instead of conflict, you break the cycle. You become untouchable, not because you're cold or distant, but because you've decided to protect your mind like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Your nervous system wasn't designed to live in constant defense. Every time you allow someone to pull you into their drama, you train your brain to stay on edge. You flood your body with stress hormones. You exhaust your energy on things that don't matter. But the moment you shift your focus away from reaction and toward self-regulation, you begin to reclaim that energy. You rewire your brain to remain composed, to prioritize logic over impulse, and to stay grounded even when someone tries to shake you. This kind of control doesn't come from pretending to be unaffected. It comes from knowing your worth so deeply that someone else's chaos no longer deserves a place in your head. When you do this once, truly, fully, without hesitation, you send a message to every toxic person in your life. This is where the cycle ends. Not with more arguing, not with more explaining, but with silence, with boundaries, and with unshakable calm. And once they realize they can't disturb your peace, they lose interest. They move on, because toxic people only stay where they can feed off of instability. This power is already in you. The ability to stay calm, to remain grounded, to protect your energy with unwavering resolve. It's already there. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait for them to change. You only need to change your response. Choose peace once, stand firm once, stay silent once, and everything begins to shift. You become someone who toxic people can no longer reach, not because they stop being toxic, but because you stop being available to that kind of chaos. That's real strength. That's real freedom. Toxic people are not fueled by logic or reason. They are fueled by reaction. They look for any sign of emotional vulnerability, any button they can press, any doorway into your peace. The moment you raise your voice, defend yourself endlessly, or become visibly frustrated, they gain what they came for: control over your emotional state. That's their strategy, whether conscious or unconscious. They manipulate conversations, twist your words, and push your limits, not because they want resolution, but because they want dominance. When you react, you give them confirmation that they still have power over your mind and emotions. Every emotional reaction you have becomes a data point for them. If anger breaks your composure, they'll provoke you until it rises. If guilt makes you bend your boundaries, they'll use it repeatedly. These reactions are not accidental. They're patterns toxic individuals study and exploit. And the more you react, the deeper they entangle themselves in your mental space. The worst part is that you begin to train your own brain to expect tension around them. You start anticipating conflict, preparing for arguments, and walking on eggshells, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system has become conditioned to stay on edge in their presence. But it doesn't have to stay that way. The power lies in understanding that reaction is a choice. You might not be able to control their behavior, but you can control how you respond. When you stop reacting, something shifts. The dynamic changes. Suddenly they're met with silence instead of an outburst, clarity instead of chaos, boundaries instead of explanation. And that silence, that grounded refusal to engage, becomes louder than any argument ever could. It tells them you're no longer playing the game, that their tactics no longer work. This choice not to react is not about being passive. It's an active, powerful decision to protect your inner world. It's not coldness, it's clarity. And with clarity comes control. You take back control over your emotions, your mind, and ultimately your peace. When a toxic person realizes they can no longer affect you emotionally, they begin to lose interest. Their strategy fails because toxic behavior only works where it finds fuel, and your reaction is the fuel. With practice, you begin to notice the triggers before they hook you. You gain the awareness to pause, breathe, and choose stillness over spiraling. And each time you do, your brain rewires itself to prioritize calm over chaos. In that quiet strength, toxic people find nothing to grab onto. There is nothing more unsettling to a toxic person than calm indifference. Not silence filled with passive aggression, not fake smiles masking resentment, but true, unshakable stillness. It is a power that cannot be manipulated, provoked, or disturbed. Toxic people thrive on emotional volatility. They poke, prod, and provoke in search of a reaction. They want you to snap, to explain yourself, to beg, to cry, or to defend, because all of those reactions confirm that they have access to your emotional world. But when you respond with calm detachment, when you remove their ability to influence your state of mind, they lose their footing completely. Indifference isn't about not caring. It's about caring more about your own peace than about their approval or opinion. It's the deliberate choice to protect your mind by not participating in their games. When you master this state, you become unpredictable in the best way possible. They expect you to argue, to fight back, to lose control. But when you respond with measured words, or none at all, they're thrown off. They're left scrambling, looking for a familiar pathway into your head and finding nothing. That silence becomes the loudest statement you could ever make. You no longer have control here. Maintaining calm under pressure requires training. It's not a switch you flip once, it's a skill you develop over time. It starts with the awareness of your own triggers. You must know what gets under your skin, and you must learn to observe it without acting on it. When you begin to recognize the patterns of manipulation, the guilt trips, the blame shifting, the constant criticism, you begin to see them not as personal attacks, but as predictable tactics. And when something becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. You stop reacting impulsively and start choosing your response. That's where your power begins. Calm indifference is rooted in emotional discipline. It means learning to stay composed even when someone is pushing every button. It means not letting their chaos dictate your internal state. The more you practice, the more it becomes your default setting. And the moment you consistently operate from that space, toxic people begin to fade. Why? Because there's nothing left to take from you. You're not feeding their drama, not fueling their control, not opening the door to their manipulation. This doesn't mean you don't feel anger or hurt. It means you don't hand those emotions over to someone who doesn't deserve access to them. You feel what you need to feel, but you choose how and when to express it. Calm indifference is not numbness, it's intentional emotional boundaries. It's deciding that your peace is non-negotiable. And that decision builds a mental fortress that no amount of manipulation can penetrate. When a toxic person realizes they can no longer provoke a reaction, they're disarmed. And in that moment, you reclaim full control. Not over them, but over yourself. That's the only control that ever really mattered. There comes a moment when you must choose your peace or their approval. For most of your life, you may have been taught to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, to seek validation from others, even at the expense of your own well-being. But with toxic people, that pattern becomes your prison. The more you try to please them, the more they control you. The more you seek their acceptance, the more you hand them the power to define your self-worth. And the truth is, you'll never be enough for someone who benefits from you feeling small. That's why the most liberating decision you will ever make is to stop needing their approval and start fiercely protecting your peace. Toxic people don't thrive on your strength, they thrive on your self-doubt. They subtly or overtly make you question yourself, criticize your decisions, and plant seeds of uncertainty in your mind. Why? Because as long as you're unsure of yourself, you remain easier to manipulate. You keep explaining, you keep compromising, you keep chasing closure that never comes. But when you decide that your peace matters more than being understood, something powerful shifts. You begin to realize that not everyone deserves access to your truth, your time, or your emotional energy. When you stop defending yourself, you reclaim that energy. When you stop apologizing for your boundaries, you reinforce your self-respect. And when you finally understand that you don't need someone's permission to walk away, you begin to rise above their reach. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop bleeding for someone who hands you the knife. Seeking approval from toxic people is a cycle that always ends in the same place, emptiness. Because no matter how much you give, it's never enough. They move the goalposts, they change the rules, they rewrite the past to suit their narrative. And every time you try to earn their validation, you sink deeper into their emotional grip. But the moment you shift that focus inward towards your own values, your own peace, your own truth, you begin to rise. You begin to detach from their chaos and reconnect with your inner clarity. Choosing peace means you're willing to be misunderstood. It means you're strong enough to disappoint someone else in order to stay true to yourself. It means that instead of engaging in endless arguments, justifying your feelings, or trying to fix what was never yours to fix, you simply step away, not with hate, not with revenge, but with quiet, confident separation. That choice doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. You don't need them to understand your decision. You don't even need them to agree with it, because peace isn't something they give you. It's something you decide to protect, no matter what it costs. And once you make that decision, toxic people begin to lose interest. Why? Because they can't manipulate someone who no longer depends on their approval. You become grounded, you become focused, you become free. I think the nervous system is like a mirror to your environment. It adapts to what it's repeatedly exposed to. When you spend time around toxic people, even if you're not actively arguing or visibly distressed, your nervous system is still absorbing the tension, the subtle manipulation, the unpredictability of their behavior. Over time, your brain begins to expect this stress. It begins to operate in a constant state of low-grade survival, always scanning for threats, preparing for confrontation, anticipating emotional upheaval. You start to feel exhausted even in the absence of conflict, because your system is bracing for the next emotional hit. This is not weakness, it's biology. The human brain is wired to detect danger and protect you, but it doesn't distinguish between a physical threat and a psychological one. So, when you're around someone who consistently criticizes, manipulates, or gaslights you, your body reacts as if it's in danger. Cortisol increases, heart rate rises, your ability to think clearly and calmly begins to erode. Over time, this leads to emotional fatigue, burnout, and in some cases, anxiety and depression. You're not just mentally drained, you're physically and neurologically affected by repeated exposure to that toxicity. But the same way your nervous system adapts to stress, it can also be trained to adapt to peace. When you begin to remove yourself from those toxic environments and people, your system doesn't immediately relax, but it starts to learn. The absence of chaos becomes noticeable. You begin to breathe more deeply, sleep more soundly, think more clearly. It's not that the outside world has suddenly become perfect. It's that you've stopped feeding your nervous system the constant input of stress. Rewiring your brain for peace means being intentional with what and who you allow into your space. It means noticing how your body feels around certain people and choosing not to ignore those signals. It means setting boundaries, not just to avoid conflict, but to protect your inner balance. Every time you say no to a toxic pattern, your brain learns that safety is possible. Every time you resist the urge to engage in reactive behavior, your nervous system begins to reconnect. And slowly but powerfully, your mind shifts out of survival mode and into clarity, presence, and emotional strength. That's when real healing begins. When you refuse to engage in another round of accusations, explanations, or debates, you reclaim control of the narrative. Toxic people rely on your willingness to argue They need you to prove your point, defend your character, or explain your intentions. Every retort you offer becomes fuel for their next provocation. But when you choose silence instead, when you calmly acknowledge that nothing productive will come of continued back and forth, you break their pattern. Your quiet refusal to argue speaks volumes. It shows that you value your energy more than their drama, and that you will no longer participate in a cycle designed to destabilize you. Setting clear boundaries is equally transformative. Boundaries are simple declarations of what you will and will not tolerate. You might say, "I'm not discussing this," when you raise your voice, or "I won't respond to texts after 9 p.m. Those statements serve as guardrails for your own well-being. Once you articulate them, you demonstrate that your peace is non-negotiable. If those boundaries are crossed, your action is immediate. You leave the room, end the call, or disengage from the conversation altogether. This consistency teaches toxic people that their tactics have consequences. You won't stay in an environment where your emotional health is under attack. By walking away or hanging up with polite firmness, you send an unambiguous signal: the cycle is over. There's no need for confrontation or justification. You've made your point simply by refusing to continue. Over time, toxic individuals learn that their usual provocations won't land. They begin to recognize that when they push too hard, you practice the boundary you set. And because they derive satisfaction only from your distress, they eventually stop trying. Their pattern collapses not because you changed them, but because you removed the stage on which their drama played. Silence and boundaries also safeguard your own internal state. You aren't carrying around the weight of unanswered insults or unanswered questions. Instead, you preserve your clarity and focus. When you remain firm without hostility, you model a healthier way to navigate conflict, not by feeding it, or by refusing to feed it. That refusal is itself an act of self-respect, reminding you that your peace is the prize worth protecting. In the end, the absence of argument and the presence of firm limits create a space where toxic behavior cannot survive. Your calm, boundary-driven response becomes a shield, and once you wield it, toxic people find no purchase and no reason to stay. True strength isn't measured by how loudly you can defend yourself or how forcefully you react to provocation. It's measured by your ability to remain unshaken when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance. Non-reactivity is a deliberate practice state in which you see a toxic tactic for what it is, a bid for your attention and control, and you choose not to hand it over. In that moment, you reclaim the power they thought they still had. You don't have to deny your emotions or pretend nothing affects you. You simply let their words and actions pass through without anchoring in your sense of self. That detachment breaks the cycle of toxicity at its root, because toxic behavior requires a reaction to survive. When you decide once and for all that maintaining your well-being is more important than engaging in another round of drama, you send a clear message. Your peace cannot be bargained for, argued over, or manipulated. Practicing non-reactivity takes courage because the instinct to defend, explain, or retaliate is wired deep into us. But every time you choose silence over response, observation over judgment, and calm over chaos, you build a mental fortress. Your brain begins to expect steadiness, not storms. You become someone who doesn't crumble under criticism, guilt trips, or blame. Instead of fueling their behavior with emotional outbursts, you starve it of attention and it loses momentum. You don't need to change the toxic person. You only need to change your response. By refusing to react, you force them to confront the emptiness of their tactics. In the quiet space you create, something remarkable happens. Toxic people naturally fall away. Their usual strategies no longer work, so they look elsewhere for a target. They drift away not because you've attacked them, but because you've dismantled the stage on which they perform. And in that liberation, you find true freedom. You rediscover the energy you once wasted on conflict, and you redirect it toward your growth, your relationships, and your purpose. Choosing non-reactivity is not a one-time event. It's a commitment you renew every time you feel provoked. But the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes until your default state is one of calm authority. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the ultimate form of self-respect, and it's the most effective way to protect your mind from those who would seek to destabilize it. True strength lies not in the noise of battle, but in the steadfast peace you carry within. You hold the ultimate power to end the cycle of toxicity not by fighting harder, but by refusing to play a role in their drama. When you choose your peace over reaction, maintain calm indifference instead of provoked emotion, and uphold firm boundaries without apology, you reclaim control of your mind and your life. Your worth no longer hinges on their approval, and your nervous system learns to crave calm instead of chaos. Silence becomes your loudest statement, and non-reactivity your strongest shield. In that unlocked space of clarity, toxic strategies lose all their fuel, and with repeated practice, they simply evaporate from your world. True freedom isn't found in confrontation or in proving yourself. It's found in the steady, unshakable resolve to protect your inner balance above all else. Make that choice once, make it fully, and you'll discover that toxic people can't bother you again, not because they changed, but because you did.